4.26, 147 split, 38.5-inch vertical, right?
Yeah.
To me, the most technically sound corner in the draft. There's nobody better at technique. Like Witherspoon, the ability to mirror receivers at the line of scrimmage, the quick feet is phenomenal.
Everybody, welcome in on a Tuesday. That was Chris Sims on Michigan corner DJ Turner. Sims on his Unbuttoned pod. People still reacting to the draft over the weekend, and why not? You wait all year long for it, and the players fall where they do. They go to their teams, and then everybody wants to talk about them and what they're getting, and, that's the Cincinnati Bengals. They're going to get the fastest guy in the draft in DJ Turner, and now Michigan, one of the players that they have to replace, cornerback 2 on their team. Now, if you're new to the Maize and Blue Reviews, good afternoon, Michigan football. We are here 5 days a week, at least, talking about Michigan football. I say at least because if there's a basketball game or a football game, we're on afterwards. And, right now we're on 1 o'clock weekdays talking about the latest in Michigan sports. And yesterday we were talking about the draft, and there's been a theme over the last week or two as we take feedback from the people. If you're somebody that's watching this live or listening to this live, you have the ability to ask a question, make a point, contribute to the show. I've been a lot of people talking about, oh man, Michigan, they really need to recruit better. They really need better wide receivers. And, you see you see a little bit of everything from everyone, there's always something. But this has been one of those things. And then there's been somebody else like, oh yeah, receivers. It's been a narrative a little bit, at least on this show. And it made me think of the question that I am going to ask you today. And that is, what is the biggest roadblock that could prevent Michigan from winning a national championship? That's right. We are in the position now where we sit here on May the 2nd, where we're talking about Michigan football winning it all. We're talking about them not just beating Ohio State, not just winning the Big Ten, not just getting to the college football playoff. We're talking about getting to the college football playoff and winning it all. I ask you that question. We'll take your response. I've got a few ideas myself. Also, amidst all the hype and the hoopla of the NFL draft, Michigan went out there and landed a place kicker. And we'll tell you about him coming up here as we explore the question about the biggest roadblock for Michigan winning it all this year. Now, you just sit back and you think about it a little bit. What was it last year that prevented Michigan from winning it all? I think it's pretty easy because Michigan only lost one game. It's easy to identify the game. It was the semifinal against TCU. And then what was Michigan's biggest roadblock in that game? Now, there were a lot. There were 5 big things that happened in that game. But I would think that the turnovers, the 2 pick sixes, is what would win if we were polling everybody. So, you could say turnovers, which are big in every game, but in particular, you could say pick sixes, multiple pick sixes. Now, I don't care who Michigan's playing next year. If they throw multiple pick sixes in a game, they're going to have a tough time winning that game. So let's note multiple pick sixes down there. Now, some of these things, when you start talking about, losing ball games, some of them are obvious, and I've written down some of the obvious ones. But when I really came down to it and studied and thought about it and put it all into play for this upcoming year, what's Michigan's biggest roadblock to the national championship? I've went and identified Michigan State. The backyard brawl at East Lansing. Mel Tucker heading into his 4th season. He's got all of his players in place. He's got all got all of his players out there that he wants in place. This is the time when you get it going, when you're up. And yeah, D'Antonio left him in a bad spot. And yeah, last year was really bad. But now, heading into his fourth season, they've got that game at home. That's up at the, they call that the woodshed. It's going to be a tough one for Michigan. That's the biggest roadblock. Well, that's me trying to start off with a little bit of humor. And I thought about this when I was scrolling through Twitter last night, watching the Rangers get beat by the Devils in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And it reminded me that you can have a little fun. Like, how about this tweet that I saw last night? Having a little fun with Michigan State. There's been another Spartan that has headed to the transfer portal. This time, it's actual Sparty has hit the transfer portal. He is it's really tough times up there in East Lansing when even the mascot is hitting the transfer portal. All right, so some of the easy ones that you get into, the roadblocks that would prevent Michigan from winning it all. Of course, injuries. I mean, any big game, you could talk about that. Heading into any season, I think almost any team, depending on where that injury is from. Like Michigan did have a lot of injuries last year, and they were able to overcome. You really start right at the top with a quarterback position. They lost the previous year's starter and backup, Cade McNamara, and then you go to running back. Obviously, we know what happened at times with Blake Corum, with Donovan Edwards. We go to the tight end position and Eric All. We go to the offensive line. It's not like those guys were out there and started as a unit for all 12, 13, 14 games. There were a lot of players that had to move around and backups come in there. So the depth was important, but injuries is always something that it goes without saying. Injuries. Turnovers, I think, goes without saying too. I mean, again, you throw 2 pick sixes in any game next year, you're going to have a tough time. Obviously, that's what happened with TCU. Refs I put in there because that's another one that the fans will go to. You can't do anything about that one. But, are the refs going to be a roadblock? I really don't believe that, but I put that in there mostly for your benefit because a lot of Michigan fans truly, they believe that the refs are against either Michigan, Jim Harbaugh, or the Big Ten Conference, or some, combination of those things, or just one of them, that the refs really are against Michigan. Hey, sometimes you do run against a better team. In 2021, Michigan in the semifinal, they lost to the Georgia Eagles, or the Georgia Bulldogs, as half the team is now playing for Philadelphia. They were the better team. You can admit that sometimes when you go against a better team, and Georgia was clearly the better team. So that could be a roadblock. Now, Michigan, I think they should be behind Georgia as the number 2 team in the preseason. I know preseason rankings don't mean a whole lot, except that we do try to think about how good this team can be. Can they beat Ohio State again? Can they win the Big Ten again? Can they return to the college football playoff? And since we're talking about getting back to the college football playoff, and I think it's legit to talk about. Sometimes, that's the sky and the pie in the sky stuff. Not now, not here, not now with Michigan. They could run into a better team. It might not be Georgia. It could be Alabama. How many other teams out there? Florida State, Oregon. I mean, whatever team that you're thinking about, there could be a better team that could be a roadblock. That's going to happen. You could also get, I don't think Michigan State the same year that they lost to Georgia back there in 21. I don't think that Michigan State was a better team than Michigan, but they beat them. And so on that Saturday, they were the Saturday, October the 30th of 2021, Michigan State was the better team. And there were a lot of things that went on, especially in the second half of that game. People would want to bring up the refs, and certainly in the first half, that was big. But K9, Kenneth Walker, the 5th or whatever, he scored 5 touchdowns, I believe, in that game. A big game with a player that goes off with Kenneth Walker, that could be a roadblock in any kind of game. You get just a remarkable player that just has, I don't know, it wasn't a once in a lifetime because he proved out to be he has proven to be a great back. But a big game with a player that goes off. And then for TCU, I think Michigan was a better team than TCU. Michigan was a big time favorite in that game, but they gave up too many big plays. Now you can say in the yardage, like the 2 pick sixes, you could say the DJ Turner, who we heard Chris Sims talking about, give up that 76-yard touchdown to the now Chargers wide receiver Quentin Johnston, who broke a tackle. Turner was going to get him down on the field short of the sticks on a third down. He had the chance to, had him lined up, couldn't make the tackle. The rest is history. That's a big play. That was that after the 2 pick sixes, and then and you get back to the turnovers. Well, Michigan did everything, the things that you go without saying in the TCU game. They gave up too many big plays. They threw too many pick sixes. They turned it over. The refs were involved. I mean, the whole thing with TCU. I don't know why I bring myself to bring that game up. I have to still, but I don't. It's not a lot of fun. Clearly, I'm bringing up the semifinal from last year, but you have to do it at some point and look ahead to the next season. If we're talking about roadblocks, don't get into a game, even if you're a big time, almost double digit favorite, and start coughing it up. And I don't know, did Michigan beat themselves? No, I mean, you got to credit TCU for making those plays, but yeah, turning the ball over in a big game is a no-no. And any one of those 5 big plays, including the Philly special, didn't happen, then Michigan would have had their chance against the Dogs. And would it have been any different? I don't know. It was different. Ohio State came a shank away from playing in the national championship game. So just like nobody was really giving TCU a chance against Michigan, nobody really would have been giving Michigan a chance against Georgia. But if Georgia played like Michigan did against TCU, Michigan could have won the championship last year. So there we go. So those are some of my thoughts. And you can see I go from offense, defense to special teams, and I'm going to look over them a little bit. But let's see what the people, I mentioned the people, and then I haven't gone to them at all. And I ask you the biggest roadblock that could prevent Michigan from winning a national championship. Let's go to the feedback. I really hope Jay, who yesterday we were discussing athletic director Ward Manuel, and I started telling him, to think before he posted. I was just having a little fun with him. And then I didn't see any more from Jay. I hope he returns because he was a first timer. And, I welcome everybody in. I look forward to the debate. I'm really happy that you come in and participate, but maybe I should be a little kinder when it comes down when people are taking the time out to leave a message and not, do what I did with Jay yesterday. But maybe he'll be back. He is a Michigan. I think he's a Michigan man. JP has given a roadblock or two. He says, with our schedule and barring any injuries, we as a program will be our biggest roadblock. Ooh. We as a program will be the biggest roadblock. The coaches and the play calling included. We have the talent to be great. We just need to properly utilize it, in my opinion. Play calling. Coaches. It's going to be an eternal roadblock. Woo! And I did note that one when it comes down to play calling. Scott. Conservative play calling. I might as well get the bell out for injuries. It goes without saying, and then I said it. And then JP said it. And then Scott has said it. Injuries. What would you consider being a roadblock to Michigan winning the national championship this year? Account 22 specifically says Georgia. Andres gets specific with teams. Penn State, Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama. You're talking about running into some teams that can beat you. So Andres is thinking that only Penn State, Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama. And I think if we all think about that, Andres doesn't seem like he's too far off. It's going to be the roadblock for Michigan winning a national championship. A handful of teams. With Georgia and Alabama, I think everybody would put those two down. Ohio State, Michigan's in a great spot, which we haven't been able to say or haven't felt like, for me, being able to say for a long time. I didn't think they were in a great spot last year. Come to find out they were. Same thing with the year before. But yeah, Ohio State for sure. And then Penn State. That game is on the road. And I know it's winnable. I know in the summertime, we're not in the summertime yet, but even in the springtime, I've already seen a little bit. There'll be Michigan fans like James Franklin's overrated. The Nittany Lions are a joke. That was a 4-point game in Happy Valley. Michigan is heading up there this year to play Penn State. When is that game? Let's have a look. I've had it written down over there. That is on November the 11th. Mark it down, Andres. So you got two of the big contenders in the Big Ten East in Georgia and Alabama. I think that's right in line with a nice conversation about a roadblock. Let's see what Leo is saying about potential roadblocks. Michigan needs to open it up and knock out overly matched opponents by halftime. That would give the second and third stringers extensive in-game experience for next year. Well, I think there's a point to that. I think your best laid plans, like in the non-conference, is like wipe everybody out and get your second and third stringers in. But then Leo becomes the reality. Certainly there is the opponent, and they can have something to do with that. The other part is, as guys go to any program, is there any program, Leo, in college football, I don't know, in the 21st century, as great as some of the Alabama, let's just say Georgia, I don't know who else, so just say those two teams that are wiping teams out at the half and putting their second and third stringers in for the majority of the second half to work on next year? The answer to that is no. And fans, in particular, fans of their own team, they want that. I want that myself. I see the non-conference, and what was Michigan was up 38-0 on UConn. It's like, empty the benches, let's see it. And yet there were still guys in there. Did Blake Corum score all 5 of those touchdowns in the first half? I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. You're thinking, get everybody else in there, sit everybody else down. And the point here is that guys want to play, even if it's against UConn and you're up 38-0 at the half. Even if, and like the majority of the other games, I mean, what are we really looking at in the Big Ten? Michigan was up. Let's think about it here. They were down against Ohio State. They were down against Illinois at the half. Obviously, you're not working on your bench there. Rutgers was Michigan. They were down at the half. They were down at the half in the last 3 conference games, right? Because it was, or were they up against Illinois 7-3? Let me think it over. I have to go back. 4 field goals. I think that they were down 7-3. I could be wrong about that one, but it seems like who scored the touchdown? Michigan only had a field goal. Were they down at the half in their final 3 games? No, because Nebraska was in there and they were up on Nebraska. In fact, they were up 17-3, but even up 17-3 against Nebraska, when it was one of those games, they didn't really have a comfortable lead at the half in any Big Ten game. They were up 17-13 on Maryland. They were up 13-0 at Iowa. They were tied with Indiana at 10. They were up by 2 on Penn State. What was it against Michigan State? 13-7. That was too close to empty the benches. As pitiful as the Spartan football program is, you can't bench everybody. Mentioned they were down by 3 against Rutgers. They were up 17-3. Maybe 2 touchdowns would have been enough. But Leo, that sounds good, but I don't think it's realistic. Maybe I should have just said that without going through the whole thing. Biggest roadblock, OSU. Can't really argue about that. Mark, injuries, particularly, he says, in East Lansing. Scott indicating that Iowa could be waiting for Michigan in the Big Ten championship game. I'd like to see that. That'd spice things up a little bit. With you're assuming that Cade McNamara would be the starter. I'll also assume that Eric All will be there as well. Is anybody else that's transferring over to Iowa? Maybe guys that hit the transfer portal. Let's see, Mark. He's on a run here of some of the feedback. Biggest roadblock is Michigan's self-inflicted roadblocks, not working on the pass game early in the season and during blowouts. Don't run out the clock. Get reps in the passing game and work plays and players that need the game execution. I think the coaches are looking at that and saying, okay, we see what you're saying. And I think that is part of the plan, except that they didn't execute the passing game, and it didn't say click. I say this a lot until the Ohio State game. So up until the 12th game, they really didn't have. Hey, listen, we sat here every week like Michigan looks great, everything looks fine, they're rolling ahead, this thing's going well, they're undefeated, but oh man, they gotta hit some bombs, they gotta hit the downfield passing game. That's all anybody said repeatedly. And so they were trying. How about Michigan hitting on the passing game early in the season and during blowouts? How about that? Scott going with injuries. Let's see if anybody else has anything else. Todd, roadblock. Possible to trip up anywhere. It's very hard to get to the college football playoff. That's right. The landmines roadblock. That's true, Todd. Now, if Todd, you may have done some coaching or something, like if everywhere out there's things. I mean, we're sitting around talking about how they're going to get to the national championship game of the roadblock. Michigan better be thinking about how to get better and get everything going in the summer phase before they think about making their plans for Houston and the national championship game. Scott getting in on the humor. Let's thanks, Scott. I mean, that made me laugh. I seeing Tuck's coming on the feedback probably shouldn't make me laugh as much as it does, but it does. It makes me laugh. It's because the state was so into it. They were so into the Tuck is coming and the cigar smoking barbecue set. They just you can't blame them. But now here they are. And they've got that he's Tuck staying for a while. So here's some roadblocks that I put on, specifically with the team, offense, defense, and special teams. Remember when I talked to the former player that was at one of the Michigan practices and he was going through and he liked this and he liked that. And then at the end, he said, biggest question is going to be the kicking game, in particular, the field goal kicking, replacing Moody. It was like, you say that. He liked everything else, but then there was the kicking game. Well, Tommy Duman is going to be handling the punting, and they don't really have any place kicker. Adam, which we'll get to coming up, the freshman that is coming in, and they have a couple freshmen coming in. But when you start going through the particulars of these, I would first go to the defense. And these are just things that I'm thinking about. I don't say specifically it would be the defense over the three. I think I think that when you do go to the defense, is Michigan better against? Will they be better this year against the pass, or will they be better against the run? It might not be the thing that would be the biggest roadblock. They might be better against the run, but when it comes down to Penn State and Ohio State, they have elite top end backs, Singleton and Allen, the Nittany Lions on the road. Henderson and Williams coming in. Obviously, Ohio State has some receivers as well. But it could be the run defense. When you're talking about, these are how teams are talking about Michigan. It's like, you better start with stopping the run against Penn State and Ohio State before you start talking about anything else. And I think that's what people are going to say about Michigan. And they might say it even more against Michigan. Although I like Michigan's on paper, Michigan clearly has better receivers than Penn State. I know the transfer portal could still happen, but from what I saw in the spring, and there's no Dotson on Penn State. I know, so there he is. They'll be looking for some pass catchers for sure. So I think the run defense, that could be a roadblock in their two big games when you're talking about high-end backs. Now, here's the special teams in the kicking game. And they got to replace two guys that were picked this past weekend in the NFL draft in Robbins and Moody. Enter Samaha, Adam Samaha, the left-footed kicker, who will be coming in. How is he going to do? There's also a preferred walk-on coming in, CJ McNally. And usually we don't sit around talking about preferred walk-ons. However, when you go back to recent history, I remember when Quinn Nordine, who could, Michigan, Harbaugh had the slumber party at Nordine's to get him, the number one kicker in the country. And then at one point he had Moody in there because Moody was more accurate on the close. And I was like, I don't like the kicking rotation. Pick one of the guys and go with it. Stay with Nordine is what I think I was thinking. And Harbaugh was like, no, I'm going to go with Moody. And then he kept with Moody. And that proved out Harbaugh in this case, most cases, he ended up knowing, he ended up doing the right job by going with Moody. But, this is a potential roadblock with the kicking game. You got to replace a kicker that was selected in the third round of the NFL draft, the best kicker in Michigan history. Now, something that you may have missed over the weekend was that Michigan landed a transfer kicker. They went to the portal and got a kicker named JT, James Turner, who kicked at Louisville the last couple years, and he is from Saline. And he's making his return to Michigan, 4 years with the Cards. I got his social media post up saying he's excited for his opportunity at Michigan, coming in like that. Some of the numbers on Turner. You look here, where are the ones that I wanted to tell you about? All right, there it is. He's going to be a fifth-year senior, 1 for 6 on field goal attempts of 50 yards or more. So he doesn't have the dynamic leg, and yet inside the 50, he was 87%. And inside the 40, he only missed one kick inside of 40 yards in his career. So that's really good consistency. But, and you start looking at Moody's, you're like, okay, yeah, really good numbers that are sitting over there. But none of the 3 potential replacements that Michigan has, and you could also put Charlie Menser, who saw some action in the spring game, in there as well. And so that's why Michigan went out there and got Turner, who has some experience. So your guess, and maybe there could be a rotation here, just looking at it, just thinking about it. I don't know. I've seen some of the video of Samaha bombing kicks on a high school field. Now there's not a rush on him, but he looks like, 50, 60 yarders. He's different when you have a rush, different when you go to college. So who knows, but he's got a strong leg. My point is that it could be this Turner for kicks that are, I don't know, inside the 50. And then if they need a long one, it could be Samaha. Who knows? The competition, we'll see how it ends up playing out there. But it's a couple things to think about when it comes down to the kicking game. I went to the defense, how I think that the run defense could be a roadblock against Penn State and Ohio State. We'll see on that, which leads me, before I get back to some feedback, to the offense. The running game, nobody's going to picked Michigan's running game, spearheaded by Blake Corum, and then with the Donovan Edwards in there, and then, a few others, that would be a roadblock from Michigan winning it all. But people have talked about the passing game, and they've mentioned it a few times here. Will the coaches open things up? Will they utilize the passing game? Will they get the passing game going more frequently? Will they have the receivers? And I think that Michigan is going to be okay here. I don't think this is going to be a roadblock that will prevent them from winning it all. I think JJ in his second year, I'm expecting him to be better. You say, well, where's JJ? Where do you want him to get better at? I want him really to stay like he was late in the season, where he started clicking with his receivers in the passing game. Certainly you don't want him throwing any pick sixes. It goes without saying. The turnovers. But I think he found it. He found his rhythm. He got it going at the best time against Ohio State. And he was good in the Big Ten title game. And besides a couple plays in the college football semifinal, hopefully he can learn from that. But, I think with JJ McCarthy in the passing game, I'm expecting it to be better. Now, people want 5-star wide receivers, and they want playmakers in the passing game. Kojo, he was somebody that suffered along with McCarthy in getting that downfield passing game going. He lacked consistency until the Ohio State game. Better late than never. Roman Wilson, I think, is underrated. I think most Michigan fans like him, but I don't think that they feel like he is potentially an elite wide receiver. I think he could be the fastest player in college football. I think he could be one of the best players in college football. So I'll put him in there, and then I'll also put Loveland in that passing game. What if I made him, instead of a tight end, if I made him tight end / wide receiver? Would you feel better? Because this would be the group that's going to be targeted, and certainly we're talking about big games. Kojo, Roman Wilson, and Colston Loveland. That's a pretty good trio. I think you can beat Penn State. You can beat Ohio State. You can take on anybody in the college football playoffs if Loveland gets better, if Roman Wilson is playing like he did last year, and Kojo plays like he did late in the year. Those are some ifs, but I think they're achievable. And then the other part I'm going to put into the passing game is this wild card, and that is Donovan Edwards. Donovan Edwards, we saw him against Rutgers get down the sideline and catch a pass. We saw him against Rutgers get into the end zone and make a nice catch. We saw him when he was a freshman go to, Maryland, and catch 10 balls for 170 yards and including, I think, a 77-yard touchdown. Remarkable in the passing game. It was Ron Bellamy, the wide receivers coach, who was talking about Edwards last year. It said, if he was one of our slot guys, he would be one of the best. Well, you're looking for dynamic, game-changing ability in the passing game. A lot of people reminded me every time I listened to, I guess it would be Lions fans and maybe draft gurus, when they started talking about Jamar Gibbs, the running back, who ended up getting picked too early by the Lions, but he's a hell of a player. And to justify it, hell, he might end up being the greatest pick ever. We'll see. It still is a little bit early to me, but they're like, this guy's a game changer when it comes to a running back in the passing game. That's what Donovan Edwards is. Donovan Edwards, Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, Donovan Edwards is a lot like Gibbs. And what he's going to bring to the table, I think Donovan Edwards could be better than Gibbs. He might already be better than Gibbs. Donovan Edwards could be a first-round draft pick, and a lot of people want Michigan. They're like, well, Ronnie Bell was the 7th rounder. They need higher picks. Well, I present to you the one-armed bandit, who could be like Jahmyr Gibbs, and he could end up in the first round. It's a thought. And I don't think that's going to be a roadblock that's going to prevent Michigan from winning it all with their wideouts. The others, I just included them out here. O'Leary, who we saw in the spring game, Morris and Clemens, who we saw, Morris, the big third down catch against Illinois. Clemens in the spring game, but, most people, spring game from 2 years ago. But I think most people, if you had to say who's going to step up after the, 3-4 guys that we're talking about, a lot of people are saying number 0. Yeah, hey, whatever. It could be Morris, it could be O'Leary, but then you've got the trio of freshmen: Carmelo, Frederick, and Samaj, English, Moore, and Morgan. Could one of those guys? Certainly. English is pretty highly rated. Morgan, we have heard about him for a long time from being in state. And then Frederick Moore, did he put on a show? Yes, he did. He put on a show in the spring game. So did O'Leary. I feel better about Michigan's wide receivers and pass catchers, especially when I put Colston Loveland and Donovan Edwards into the mix in the pass receiving game, than I think most Michigan fans, certainly ones that have been using the feedback here over the last month or so. And so with that, let's get back to some more feedback and what could potentially be a roadblock or two for Michigan and in winning the national championship. You got Steve talking about the Spartans. I started it out, broke the seal on getting after Michigan State a little bit, so it's my fault. Philly special. Going back to the TCU game. Yeah, Todd, biggest roadblock, OSU, always the biggest. You're not going to get me arguing about that one. I'm right with you on that. OSU is there. U of M needs to get a second corner in their special team straight. Good to see you, D Original. Be a stranger, man. Yeah, you're right. As their teams are not going to be throwing on Will Johnson. They're not going to target him. They're not throwing him at all. They're going to be going, where's Will Johnson? Let's go over to the other corner. Whoever that other corner is going to get a lot of work. You are right, the original. And yeah, straighten up those special teams. Those are two legit roadblocks. No question. Mark, how to run YouTube. Rule 1, 2, and 3. Don't complain about the clientele. Noted. Richard, only roadblock to our success is ourselves. Intelligent mindfulness is necessary. That might be a little bit over my head, but I like the talk. You know who I really think would like that, Richard? If J.J. McCarthy was watching this. He seems to be into the mindfulness, intelligence. Let's sit back by the goalpost. I'm with you. That might be something like if I didn't see Richard here sometimes on the chat, I could think that could be JJ McCarthy entering the chat. Hey, JJ, what do you think the roadblock? Like if I was at one of the news conferences and said, hey, JJ, over here. Dennis Fithian from the Maize and Blue Review. JJ, what do you think the biggest roadblock would be for Michigan in winning the national championship this year? Well, Dennis, it's a great question. It's good to see you here. The only roadblock to our success is ourselves. Intelligent mindfulness is necessary. I'd be like, wow, that is a hell of a response. Good job, Richard. JJ. I think I've gone over that one. Todd, getting creative, focus, and prep. We believe the hype versus TCU, not what I like to see. Yeah, I was going to say, there's things to knock Harbaugh. Not right now. There's not really. I don't really have anything negative to say at all about Jim Harbaugh. But I think part, if I go to his strengths, I think prep and focus he is really good at. Scott, Roadblocks, expectations. Historically speaking, Michigan has never fared well when highly ranked going into a new season. The so-called national championship team of 99 was unranked in the preseason. Well, they were unranked 2 years ago as well. No, these are some pretty good points. In 97, they weren't ranked in the top 10 either. So you got a little bit of a point there, Scott. High expectations. Does it matter? Does what happened in 97, 99, or 20? Do those things matter to this Michigan team? But it's a point. It's a point that just because you're the number 2 ranked team in the country and you went to the college football playoff the last 2 years and you've got Ohio State right where you want them with an inexperienced offensive line, a quarterback that's a big question mark, coming into Ann Arbor, yeah, things can be set up so perfectly. I don't know if it's perfect. Things can be set up nicely. Things can look really good. People can be patting you on the back everywhere. You can have the quarterback. You can have the coach. You can have it all. And yet, what you're saying? Expectations being a roadblock? Mark is not calling Penn State a roadblock. It's a benchmark. All right. Come on, Venice. What's your roadblock? Running back? Junior. He's got a roadblock. Sloppy play, leading to lack of execution in big plays. Yeah, sloppy play. Calling a lot of, I'm giving some examples, but a lot of the unfortunate sloppy plays and turnovers, it was like all in one game, the one game that they lost. So yeah, like calling a Philly special into a zone, like we're all, you guys, we might have some gurus, and I know we have some coaches and everything else, but if I know that you're not supposed to run the Philly special into a zone, JJ and the coaches should have known that, and they shouldn't have called the Philly special. There should have been an audible there. That was sloppy play calling. And then, even though they were upset and it was a poor call, bad call by the officials, when you're down there at the 1, you can't just automatically assume that you can run it in with a linebacker that you moved up to fullback and on a quick count to get him in there because he could fumble it, and he did. You know, I don't do this, and I'm not saying I'm going to, but I wish I had in some cases, or I wish I would have had a camera on some of you for not the Philly special, but the whole replay. I know how people would act when the replay, when they called it not a touchdown with Roman Wilson, and then Michigan had it at the 1. But just when so it was like you're watching the replay. Remember the guys in the booth were like, "Oh, this is a touchdown. This is a touchdown." You know, they're looking at it. You know, you review scoring plays. You're taking a look at it. This is a touchdown. They must have said it like 10 times. This is a touchdown. I'm watching it. I thought it myself. This is a touchdown. So then to hear them say it wasn't a touchdown was a little aggravating. But then, so they're at the half yard, whatever it was. Did they get it at the half yard line, 1 yard line? Technically, whatever it was. If they get it, they're going to score a touchdown for sure here. They fumble. That's the one where I wouldn't have mind having a camera, how I would have been watching it. I'd have been like, all right, you're going to get. I don't know exactly I don't know what would my face look like when I saw that it was a fumble. I'm guessing it. I think it was more like this. No. Something like that. Pretty much how everybody's face was looking. All right, Seth. I like the name Seth. This Michigan team is the most talented since 97. Natty or bust, in my opinion. There you go, Seth. I like the confidence. And you know what? Mostly when I see people, and especially like people in the media run out it's natty or bust, and we're like, okay. And yet, a couple weeks ago, I ran this out there just like you, Seth. I'm with you. It feels like natty or bust, which is good. That's right where you want. It's right where you want things to be. Henning to Iowa. That's the one I was thinking about. Has he made that decision? It's a tough part. It's a tough part with AJ Henning. I like AJ Henning. I follow him on social media, and he put one of my favorite posts up ever. I don't know if it was his brother or cousin or whoever it was, but it's a little guy, and they were showing the punt return that Henning had last year, and the little guy was rooting for AJ, and you could hear him in the background, "Go AJ!" and then touchdown. And then, people are asking, like, they wanted to see the little guy, and then there was the little guy with AJ heading out on the field. And so now for him, if he would go to Iowa, but Michigan would play. The good part is, account 22, is you've got Michigan into the Big Ten championship game, but yeah, Iowa, and potentially having to play Henning. Actually, I liked all three of those guys. I liked Cade, I liked All, and I liked Henning. So, yeah, that's a tough one. That's a little bit like what's his name that went off in the championship game? Spike Albrick. I really liked him too. And then he transferred to Purdue. That was a sign of things to come. It's like guys can just jump right into the conference. You're going to be rooting for him one day, rooting against him the next. Ooh, this is shade at Cade. They won't be in Indy. Here's more shade. Oh, no, shades of laughing here with a ring-a-ding-ding thing. All right. Yeah, well, Iowa, they don't have much of a choice. I mean, you see some of those dudes that they were rolling out there last year? I mean, Cade's like, Joe Montana compared to those guys. Let's see. Okay, a few more. Tuck is spending. Tuck better be. I don't think Tuck needs to save. Yeah, $95 million. I was gonna say he better save his money. Tuck is good. $95 million buy you a lot of cigars. Tuck is a wealthy man. There's no doubt about that. Tuck is he's sitting good on a big pile of money. Tuck's sitting over there burning $100 bills out on the back patio. He gets the call. I think it's his wife. She's like, "What's that? Another one hit the transfer portal? The hell with them. Those bonuses that I thought about giving my coaches this year, we're keeping those again. Maybe they'll hit the transfer portal too." That wasn't a good look for Tuck. Keeping the bonus money. Remember that? So wasn't that how it went? Here's more on Tuck. When you laugh at Tuck coming, Tuck counting the money. Taking a couple shots at Tuck. Tuck deserves it right now. Coach Tucker deserves a little criticism when, he puts out a spring game and you look at it and you're like, team didn't go to a bowl game last year, and it's like he was Mr. Transfer Portal. But one thing about the transfer portal, it's what we're realizing as we see it develop is that the transfer portal is great and it gives and it takes and everything else, but it gives to the good teams because people want to go and play for championships. If you are not good, the transfer portal is terrible with the players that it could take. And then I don't even know what to think about the transfer portal with Colorado. Deion's he's like playing a slot machine. Boom, boom, boom. He gets him. Or Deion's like playing dice because he's got his 5 stars, but then he's like, I'm throwing the dice because I want more. And then he loses half of them. It's a wild thing when it goes on with Deion and Tuck. More Tucker talk. Tucker talk. This is true. Kenneth Walker. Why did the Seahawks take Charbonnet? Wait, Zach Charbonnet. All right. Why did they take him so early in the draft when they had K9? That was a little bit of a surprise to me. Scott thought I was crazy when, or Dennis thought I was crazy when I mentioned that Brad Robbins could get drafted. Yeah, I didn't think he would get drafted. No, you're right about that. I'm glad he did. I am glad he did. All right. See, this is what Andres thought, that he thought Nordine was going to be a Sunday kicker, and then he fell apart later in his career. I bet if you told Jim Harbaugh the night of the sleepover, hey, Jim, in 6 years, you will have a kicker. And I think the 6 years, it could have been maybe right around that. It's when Arroyo was drafted by the Bucks pretty high. He might even have been a second-round pick, and everybody lambasted him like, that's a terrible pick for taking a kicker that high. But if you told Jim that night, like, Jim, there won't be a kicker picked that high in the NFL draft until a few years, and it'll be your kicker. I think Harbaugh said, why the hell do you think I'm spending the night here on the floor? Why do you think I'm sleeping on the ground trying to get me a place kicker? And then it would be the preferred walk-on. With all recruiting, I think recruiting people look at the stars and, you want them. I understand that. I want them too, except when it comes to kickers, because they'll look at it and then they'll just be like, who knows? Don't give him scholarships. But Nordine was supposed to be the best kicker. And, he's all right. He had a good leg. He had a strong leg, but it would have been Moody that it was the preferred walk-on that ended up doing it. All right. I wonder what James Turner's 40-yard dash time is. I don't know. I just want to see Turner kicking a bunch of extra points is all I want to see. He's pretty good at extra points. Let him go out there, kick, and you don't have to worry about it. Hopefully. Okay, we got some Nordine takes here. Nordine's ego killed him. A lot of times at count 22, any field or whatever else, that could be the downfall of many a man. To steal a little bit from Richard, to get a little philosophical. Speaking of Richard, he says after that draft, we should have opportunities to choose the best kickers out there. What a great point. What a tremendous point, Richard. It was a great weekend for Michigan. Were a lot of things. I don't know what that one was. JJ won that game in Columbus. Loved it. I'm getting a little bit upfield now as we go through. Jason, who started everything off at this broadcast, is now wrapping it up, saying that Roman Wilson reminds him of a Wes Welker type of wide receiver, not going to amaze anyone per se, yet is very consistent and reliable on the field. Size-wise, I get what you're saying. Welker was such a slot guy that was doing his work in 5 yards or 10 yards from the line of scrimmage. And Roman does do a little bit of that. Like, they get the ball out to him, smart, get it in the hands of the fastest guy in college football and let him see him fly. But Roman can fly. He's got a little bit of the cheetah in him. He's not as big as the cheetah. Now, unfortunately, we don't have Antoine. Antoine did not like me. And again, I think Mark, is the one that's like, don't don't smack down the people, your customers there. They're the ones that are right. But I was giving it a little bit to Antoine. And, I think he wants Roman Wilson to look a little bit more like the cheetah. A little taller than the cheetah, but I think I'm talking about that downfield, that vertical passing game. Roman Wilson, he can do it. I think I might be. We're going to get a little bit. It's made me develop a topic for later this week. It might be a maybe I'll have to do it because hot take Tuesday. Today's Tuesday. So maybe a week from now, it'll be hot take Tuesday. My hottest take for myself is that, and I guess it's Roman Wilson. I think I'm his biggest fan. I think that Roman Wilson is better than you think he is. And you think he's pretty good. I think he's exceptional. That sub 4.3 speed and getting the ball, let him go. I'm there. Todd doesn't trust the Lions scouts. Oh, we can sit around, Todd. You know, that's a can of worms. Yeah, Donovan Edwards is better. Let's go. So, feedback coming in. McBurrows talking about being cornerback 2, opposite of Will Johnson. And Scott is saying if McBurrows hits it McBig, he can get an NIL deal with McDonald's. I like it. I'm going to start using that. He can be over there at the McCorner, McPick, all of it. Here's Mark. Mark's always asking me some interesting questions. He's asking, how did Will Johnson look the first few times out compared to Walker? Well, I think it was the Hawaii game. Was that game number 2 last year? Could have been. I think it was the Hawaii game. There were 2 plays in which Will Johnson, there was one, it was, I think he had 2 catches on him. Maybe one. I'm trying to just think back. Maybe I'll have to go back and watch the game now. I was just going off the top of my head. It was, he had his hand there and the guy caught it down the sideline. He was there, but the guy made a nice catch. There was a nice throw. And then I think there was another throw into the end zone where maybe the guy had a step on him. Maybe, and so he was on Will, and so there were 2 plays that you were like, well, this guy doesn't look like the greatest thing ever. Well, you're like, hey, he's a freshman and all that. But then it was after that game or the next game was the non-conference. It runs together a little bit. That Pro Football Focus put out, you know, they do that. They put out their, you know, they're charting every single play. And then they were like, Will Johnson, out of every corner in the country, or maybe it was just a freshman, had the best contested catch rate or something. And it was like, whoa, you know, if you're just watching the game and kind of feeling like, you know, you'd have been like, you know, Will wasn't all that hot, you know, in his first time out or 2. And yet Pro Football Focus was like he was awesome in one area. So I don't know, like, you're asking me. Compared to Amari and Walker, we don't know. I don't, you know, Will Johnson, we just saw out there on the field for the first time. Amari and Walker, you know, could be the best thing that happens to him. You go out there, everybody's telling you, you know, you're cornerback 2, you're the starter, the coach ordains you as the starter, and everybody's like, you're the man. And then you go out and have a poor game in the spring game. Everybody's now like, nobody's mentioned Amari and Walker at all. It'll be a little motivation for him. Motivating factor. Okay, a lot of feedback. How about John? We should all be excited for this season. 3 years ago, we weren't talking smack. It's great to be a Michigan Wolverine. Well, Scott, there's no better thought here on this Tuesday than that one right there. It is so different. If you've watched me since I've come on here, you can be like, well, you know, he's a pretty positive guy towards Michigan, man. He doesn't have any problems with Michigan. This guy, Ithian, is right up there, always patting Michigan on the back. And, you know, we mentioned that K-9 game from October 30th of 2021. This podcast came on the air 2 days later. Since that, November the 1st of 2021, Michigan's only lost 2 games. So, I mean, like, there's really no reason. Like, if you're looking good. And then the game that they lost against Georgia in 21, it sucked. It was New Year's Eve, but it also felt like Michigan had, because they'd really achieved something by beating Ohio State, and the euphoria of winning the Big Ten, validating even that victory, then getting to the college football playoff. It was all, and then seeing how good Georgia was, it was like, the next day wasn't as crushing as you might think. Until last year, the TCU game is a little bit crushing. And there's only been, I don't know how many shows that I've done here, and I don't even know how many people know this or would have watched, but I came out the next show after the TCU game, and I didn't hit the controls right. I talked for 20 minutes straight. I didn't look at any of the feedback. I just talked, and it was, Michigan did this, Michigan did that. This is how I thought about the game. And then I just kind of let it all pour out. And then I looked over at the feedback, and somebody's like, nobody can hear you. Your mic's off. What are you doing? You're an idiot. I think all those, not everybody was saying that, but some of it. And I was like, wait. I didn't turn it on right. One time. It had something to do with the TCU game. Probably did. All right, tomorrow on this show, I'll let you guess what's going to happen. I have put this plea out once. I am going to put it out here one more time. And that is, I want to see you on the Maize and Blue Review. I want to see you on the Den. And I want to see you join up and say, hey, I'm on the Den because I started watching a podcast and you told me that I can go on every day and all day and all night talk about Michigan, recruiting, football, basketball, what's going on with the team, any other question that I have. Like all these questions that Mark puts up, these are the kind of things that we are talking about. And he puts up the McBurrow burrito. I'll take two. I want to see you over there, and I want to see you say that you're there because of the podcast. So the boss will see that and say, hey, you know what? You're doing a good job of the podcast. You're bringing people over to the Maize and Blue Review today. You go to, and this is for podcast listeners as well as the VCast, go to michigan.rivals.com, and we'll see you over there. Tomorrow, it'll be the scar of the telestrator, the one and only Jim Scarcelli, who played at Michigan in the 80s and then went on to a 25-year high school coaching career. And in between now of a fledgling professional poker player, he joins us on Wednesdays to give his thoughts on the Wolverines and what's going on with Michigan. And Scar will join us tomorrow. I'm sure he'll have some thoughts about Michigan State's attrition up in East Lansing, maybe Coach Prime, one of his favorite non-Michigan topics as well. We'll see where the coach is at tomorrow. Hopefully you will join us tomorrow at 1:00. And until then, everybody have a great day. See you later. Thanks for watching the Maize and